The morning it happened, I was standing in my kitchen in Westfield, New Jersey, staring at the Thanksgiving turkey I'd already ordered from the butcher. 22 pounds of premium bird that would now rot in my refrigerator, just like the hope I'd been carrying for months that this year would be different. That this year, my children would remember I existed. The text came from Victoria, my youngest at 25, always the spokesperson for her brothers when they wanted to deliver bad news. Mom, we all talked and we're doing Thanksgiving at Samuel's this year. Just the kids and grandkids. We want it to be more intimate. Intimate. As if their mother, the woman who worked 3 jobs to put them through college, who took out a second mortgage to help Samuel buy his first house, who spent her retirement savings on Victoria's wedding, was somehow too much of an outsider for their intimate family gathering. I read that message 17 times, my coffee growing cold in my hands. The autumn light streaming through my kitchen window felt different suddenly, harsher somehow. I could hear Mrs. Patterson next door raking leaves, the scraping sound rhythmic and endless, like she was trying to erase something that couldn't be undone. My phone buzzed again. This time it was William, my middle child, adding his voice to the chorus. Mom, we think it's better this way. Less stress for everyone. Less stress. For everyone except the woman who'd been planning this meal for 6 weeks, who'd already bought the cranberries and sweet potatoes, who'd spent the morning polishing the china that had belonged to their grandmother. I set the phone down on the granite countertop, the same countertop George and I had saved for 2 years to afford, back when we thought we were building something that would last forever. The silence in the house pressed against me like a physical weight. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, each second marking time I'd never get back. Years I'd wasted believing that love was something you could bank on, that it earned interest instead of contempt. For 27 years, I'd been the center of their universe. When Victoria was born premature and spent 2 months in the NICU, I slept in that hospital chair every single night, holding her tiny hand through the plastic incubator walls. When Samuel got arrested for underage drinking his senior year, I was the one who bailed him out at 3 a.m, who hired the lawyer, who made sure it didn't ruin his college applications. When William's wife left him and took the kids, I was the one who let him move back home for 8 months while he got back on his feet, who listened to him cry into my shoulder like he was 12 years old again. But apparently, somewhere along the way, my presence had become a burden instead of a blessing. I walked through my house that morning like I was seeing it for the first time. The family photos lining the hallway, birthday parties, graduations, Christmas mornings where we were all smiling and holding each other close. The living room where we'd spent countless Sunday afternoons watching football. The kids sprawled across the carpet while George and I shared the couch. The dining room table where we'd celebrated every milestone, every achievement, every moment that mattered. All of it felt like evidence of a life that had been lived by someone else. Someone naive enough to believe that being needed was the same thing as being loved. I thought about calling them back, demanding an explanation. I thought about showing up at Samuel's house anyway, turkey in hand and dignity be damned. But something in my chest had hardened during those 17 readings of Victoria's text message, something that tasted like metal and felt like winter. Instead, I did something I'd never done before in 27 years of motherhood. I put my needs first. I called James Morrison, the estate planning attorney George and I had used when we updated our wills 5 years ago. He was expensive, but then again, I had plenty of money to spend now that I wouldn't be hosting holiday dinners or buying Christmas presents or contributing to college funds for grandchildren who apparently didn't need a grandmother at their intimate family gatherings. Mrs. Georgeson, James said when his secretary put me through, "How can I help you today?" "I need to make some changes to my will," I said, my voice steady and cold as November air. "Some significant changes." "Of course. Should we schedule an appointment for next week?" "No," I said, watching a cardinal land on the bird feeder outside my kitchen window. George had built that feeder with his own hands, back when we thought we were creating a legacy that would outlast us. "I'd like to come in today, this afternoon if possible." There was a pause. "It's rather short notice, but I can accommodate you. Is everything all right?" I thought about that question as I watched the cardinal peck at the seeds, bright red against the gray November sky. Was everything all right? My husband was dead. My children had discarded me like last week's newspaper. I was 60 years old and completely alone in the world. Everything's perfect, I said. I'll see you at 2 o'clock. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, listening to the house settle around me. The refrigerator hummed. A branch scraped against the bedroom window upstairs. The world continued to turn, indifferent to the fact that something fundamental had shifted in the universe of the Georgeson family. I thought about all the Thanksgivings past, all the times I'd gotten up at dawn to start the turkey, all the hours I'd spent setting the table with the good china and the cloth napkins, all the moments I'd watched my children laugh and argue and tell stories around that table. I thought about how grateful I'd felt to be the one who provided that foundation, that sense of home and belonging. But gratitude, I was learning, is not a renewable resource. It doesn't replenish itself with each passing year. And apparently, it has an expiration date that I'd somehow missed. By the time I left for James Morrison's office that afternoon, I'd made my decision. Not just about the will, but about everything that would come after. My children wanted an intimate Thanksgiving without their mother. They were about to learn what it really meant to be alone. The cardinal was still at the feeder when I backed out of the driveway, still bright red against the gray sky, still surviving just fine without anyone's help, just like I was about to do. James Morrison's office smelled like leather and old money, the kind of place where important decisions were made behind heavy mahogany doors. I'd been here before with George, back when we thought we were planning for a future where our children would honor our memory and protect what we'd built together. How naive we'd been. Mrs. Georgeson, James said, gesturing toward the chair across from his desk. You mentioned wanting to make changes to your estate planning. What did you have in mind? I sat down and placed my purse carefully in my lap, my hands steady despite the magnitude of what I was about to do. I want to remove my children as beneficiaries. All of them. Completely. James had been an attorney for 30 years, but I watched his eyebrows rise slightly. That's a significant change. May I ask what's prompted this decision? They've made it clear that I'm no longer welcome in their lives, I said, my voice as flat and professional as his. I see no reason to burden them with an inheritance from someone they'd rather not associate with. He picked up his pen and began making notes. And where would you like these assets to go instead? I'd thought about this during the drive over, watching the familiar streets of my neighborhood blur past. Streets where I'd pushed strollers and taught 3 children to ride bicycles, where I'd stood at bus stops and cheered at soccer games and pretended that building a family was the same thing as building something permanent. The Westfield Animal Shelter, I said. My late husband and I always talked about getting involved with animal rescue once we retired. Animals don't forget who feeds them. James wrote this down without comment, though I caught the slight tightening around his eyes. The house on Elm Street is valued at approximately $850,000, correct? And there are additional assets, the investment accounts, the life insurance payout from your husband's death, the rental property in Vermont? Everything, I said. The total estate is worth approximately $2.3 million. Every penny goes to animals who will actually appreciate care and kindness. Mrs. Georgeson, I have to ask, is this decision final? Estate planning can be emotional, especially around the holidays. Perhaps you'd like to take some time to— Mr. Morrison, I interrupted, leaning forward slightly. When my daughter Victoria was planning her wedding, she came to me crying because the venue she wanted was $20,000 more than they could afford. I liquidated my retirement fund to give her the wedding of her dreams. When my son Samuel's business was failing 3 years ago, I took out a home equity loan to keep him afloat. When William's ex-wife was demanding higher alimony, I paid for his legal fees. I have given and given and given until there was nothing left of me but a bank account and a heartbeat. I paused, watching James's pen pause above his legal pad. Yesterday, they informed me via text message that I am not welcome at Thanksgiving dinner. Not because I've done anything wrong, but because they want their celebration to be more intimate. Do you know what intimacy is, Mr. Morrison? It's sharing your vulnerabilities with people you trust. It's knowing that someone will catch you when you fall. My children don't want intimacy with me. They want freedom from me. So I'm giving them exactly what they asked for. James nodded slowly. I understand. Let me draft the documents. You'll need 2 witnesses for the signing, and I'd recommend having everything notarized as well. How long will this take? I can have the new will ready by tomorrow morning. Are you certain you don't want to include any personal items for your children? Family heirlooms, photographs, anything with sentimental value? I thought about the diamond necklace that had belonged to George's mother, the one I'd planned to give to Victoria on her 30th birthday. I thought about the gold watch George had worn every day for 20 years, the one Samuel had always admired. I thought about the china cabinet full of dishes that had been in my family for 3 generations, the ones William's daughters loved to play tea party with when they visited. They can buy their own heirlooms, I said. Sentiment is earned, not inherited. After leaving the attorney's office, I drove to the grocery store where I'd shopped for 27 years. The same store where I'd bought birthday cake ingredients and Halloween candy and endless gallons of milk for growing children. The fluorescent lights felt too bright, and everything looked different somehow, like I was seeing it through someone else's eyes. I walked past the meat counter where Mr. Jenkins was arranging Thanksgiving turkeys in neat rows. He waved at me, and I could see the question in his eyes. Was I still planning the big family dinner I'd told him about last week? Change of plans, I said when he approached. I need to cancel my turkey order. Everything okay, Mrs. Georgeson? Family emergency? Something like that, I said, and kept walking. I bought myself a bottle of expensive wine and a frozen dinner for one. The kind of meal I hadn't eaten in decades, back when I was single and thought loneliness was temporary, something that would be cured by finding the right person and building the right life. At home, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop. I hadn't used social media much since George died. It felt too complicated, too full of other people's happiness. But tonight I found myself scrolling through my children's Facebook pages, looking at their lives like a stranger peering through windows. There was Samuel, posting photos of his new kitchen renovation, the one I'd helped fund when his business started turning a profit again. There was Victoria, showing off her new car, the one she'd bought after I'd co-signed the loan because her credit was still recovering from her divorce. There was William, posting pictures from his weekend golf trip with his buddies, the same weekend I'd called him twice, asking if he wanted to come over for dinner, because the house felt too quiet. None of their posts mentioned their mother. None of their happy family photos included the woman who'd made those happy moments possible. I clicked on Victoria's most recent post, a picture of her kids making construction paper turkeys for school. The caption read, "So grateful for these little blessings. Can't wait for our cozy family Thanksgiving this year. Sometimes smaller gatherings are the most meaningful." 43 people had liked it. 12 people had commented things like, "So sweet," and "Family is everything," and "Cherish these moments." I stared at that heart emoji for a long time, wondering if Victoria felt even a flicker of irony when she typed it. Wondering if she thought about the woman who'd held her hand through 2 miscarriages before those little blessings were born. Wondering if gratitude was just another word that had lost all meaning in the modern world. I closed the laptop and walked upstairs to my bedroom. George's side of the bed was still made exactly the way I'd left it that morning. The pillow still dented from where his head had rested for 28 years. I'd kept it that way for 8 months now, some part of me believing that preserving the physical evidence of our life together would somehow make the loneliness less sharp. But tonight, I smoothed out that pillow and straightened the comforter. George was gone, and the children we'd raised together had made their choice. It was time to stop living like I was waiting for someone to come home. I opened my jewelry box and took out my wedding ring. It was a simple gold band, nothing fancy. We'd been young and poor when we got married, more concerned with building a future than making a statement. I slipped it off my finger for the first time since George's funeral and placed it in the box next to his. Tomorrow, I would sign the new will. Tomorrow, I would officially become a woman with no family, no legacy, no one to mourn her when she was gone except perhaps some grateful shelter dogs who would never know her name. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt something I'd almost forgotten, the cold, clean satisfaction of being in control of my own life. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, my heart jumped. Maybe one of them had reconsidered. Maybe they'd realized what they were doing. Maybe there was still time to fix this. It was Samuel. Mom, can you recommend a good wine for Thanksgiving dinner? Victoria said you always know the best pairings. I stared at that message for 5 full minutes. Then I deleted it without responding and turned off my phone. I signed the new will at 9 o'clock Thursday morning, Thanksgiving morning, while my children were presumably stuffing their turkey and setting their table for their intimate family gathering. James Morrison's office was quiet except for the scratch of my pen across legal documents and the soft tick of an antique clock on his bookshelf. There, I said, setting down the pen after the final signature. It's done. The 2 witnesses, James's secretary and a paralegal I'd never met, signed their names below mine. Neither of them knew they were watching me erase 3 people from existence, at least as far as my legacy was concerned. The notary pressed her official seal into the paper with a satisfying thump. The original will be stored in our vault, James said, and I'll send copies to your financial institutions within the week. What about my children? Will they be notified? James shook his head. Not unless something happens to you. Estate contents aren't typically disclosed to disinherited parties until after death. Perfect. They would go on believing they were entitled to everything I'd built, right up until the moment they learned they were wrong. The thought sent a chill of satisfaction through my chest that felt better than any Thanksgiving dinner ever could. I drove home through streets lined with cars parked outside houses where families were gathering, where grandmothers were being hugged and thanked and included. The November sky was steel gray, matching my mood perfectly. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed Mrs. Patterson from next door hanging a beautiful autumn wreath on her front door. She waved at me cheerfully. Happy Thanksgiving, Scarlett. Are you heading to the kids' house soon? Change of plans. I called back, the same response I'd given the butcher. It was becoming my standard reply to questions about family. Inside, my house smelled like nothing. No turkey roasting, no pies baking, no family chaos filling the rooms with warmth and noise. Just the artificial vanilla scent from the plug-in air fresheners I'd bought to mask the emptiness that had settled into every corner since George died. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at my kitchen table with the morning newspaper, trying to pretend this was just another Thursday. But the silence pressed against me like a living thing, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of children laughing in someone else's backyard. At 11:30, my phone rang. Victoria's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment, I felt that old maternal instinct to answer immediately, to be available whenever my children needed me. Instead, I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, it rang again. William this time, then Samuel, then Victoria again. I turned the phone face down and went upstairs to clean out my closet. It was time to get rid of George's clothes, something I'd been putting off for 8 months. I pulled his suits from the hangers one by one, checking pockets for forgotten treasures. In his navy blazer, I found a grocery list written in my handwriting. Milk, bread, Victoria's allergy medicine, Samuel's favorite cookies, something for William's kids. Even my grocery list had been about them. By the time I'd filled 6 garbage bags with clothes for donation, my phone had collected 11 missed calls and 7 voicemails. I finally listened to them while folding the last of George's sweaters. Mom, it's Victoria. I just wanted to call and wish you a happy Thanksgiving. I know we didn't invite you today, but it doesn't mean we don't love you. Call me back, okay? Hey, Mom, it's Samuel. Victoria said she called you and you didn't answer. Are you okay? We're worried about you. Mom, this is ridiculous. Pick up the phone. We're all sitting here feeling terrible. Maybe we made a mistake about today. Can you call us back? Mistake. As if excluding your mother from Thanksgiving was something you did accidentally, like forgetting to pick up milk from the store. The messages grew increasingly frantic as the day wore on. William's voice cracking slightly. Mom, please. We're all here and we're realizing how stupid we were. There's still time. Dinner isn't until 4. Please come over. Victoria crying. Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't know what we were thinking. This doesn't feel right without you. Please, please call me back. Samuel, angry now. Mom, this silent treatment isn't like you. You're scaring us. If you don't call back in an hour, I'm driving over there. I deleted each message after listening to it. my finger steady on the delete button. Their panic was delicious, but it wasn't enough. They were sorry because they felt guilty, not because they understood what they'd done. They wanted me to come running back so they could feel better about themselves, so they could pretend they were good children who'd simply made a small error in judgment. But I knew better. This hadn't been a mistake or an oversight. They'd discussed it among themselves, weighed the pros and cons, and unanimously decided their mother was surplus to requirements. The only thing they regretted now was how bad it made them look to themselves. At 3 o'clock, I heard a car pull into my driveway. Through the window, I watched Samuel get out of his BMW, the one I'd helped him lease when his credit was too damaged from his divorce. He walked up to my front door with the confident stride of a man who'd never been truly rejected by anyone who mattered to him. The doorbell rang. Then again. Then he started knocking. "Mom, I know you're in there. Your car's in the driveway. Open the door." I sat perfectly still in my living room chair, watching him through the sheer curtains. He cupped his hands against the front window, trying to peer inside. "Mom, this is crazy. We're sorry, okay? We made a mistake. Everyone's at my house waiting for you. Victoria's been crying for an hour." The knocking became more insistent. "I'm not leaving until you talk to me. I'll stand out here all night if I have to." After 20 minutes, he finally gave up and drove away. But not before I saw him take out his phone and make what I assumed was a frantic call to his siblings. At 4 o'clock, precisely when their dinner was supposed to start, I called the one person who would be genuinely happy to hear from me. "Westfield Animal Shelter, this is Rebecca." "Hello, this is Scarlett Georgeson. I spoke with your director last week about making a donation." "Oh yes, Mrs. Georgeson. We're so grateful for your interest in supporting our work. What can I help you with?" "I'd like to schedule a visit next week to tour your facilities. I'm considering a very substantial donation, potentially my entire estate, and I want to make sure it would be put to good use." There was a brief pause. "Your entire estate? Mrs. Georgeson, that's incredibly generous." "Yes, absolutely, we'd love to show you around. When would be convenient for you?" "Monday morning would be perfect. I have a feeling I'm going to have a lot of free time on my hands from now on." After I hung up, I poured myself a glass of the expensive wine I'd bought the day before and raised it in a toast to the empty house. "Happy Thanksgiving to me," I said aloud. My phone rang again, Victoria's number. This time I answered. "Mom, thank God. We've been trying to reach you all day. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Victoria. How was your intimate family dinner?" Her voice was small, fragile. "It wasn't the same without you. We realized we made a terrible mistake. Can you forgive us? Can you come over? We saved you a plate." "That's very thoughtful," I said, my voice perfectly pleasant. "But I've already eaten." You have? But you're alone." "Yes, I am. Just like you wanted me to be." "Mom, that's not what we wanted. We just thought—" "You thought exactly what you meant to think," I interrupted. "You thought I was expendable. You thought you could discard me when it was convenient and retrieve me when it wasn't. You thought wrong. Please don't be like this. We're family." I looked around my empty house, at the family photos I'd soon be taking down, at the china cabinet full of heirlooms that would soon belong to someone else. "No, Victoria. You made it very clear today that we're not family. Family doesn't exclude each other from holidays. Family doesn't make people beg for basic consideration. You wanted freedom from me? Congratulations. You have it. Mom." I hung up and turned off my phone. Outside, the sun was setting on Thanksgiving Day, painting my kitchen walls gold. Tomorrow I would visit the animal shelter and begin the process of giving my money to creatures who understood loyalty. Tomorrow I would start living for someone who deserved it. Friday morning arrived gray and bitter, matching my mood perfectly. I woke up at 6:30 out of habit, the same time I'd been getting up for 27 years to make breakfast for a family that no longer wanted me around. But instead of rushing to the kitchen to start coffee and check what needed to be prepared for the day, I stayed in bed until 9, staring at the ceiling and savoring the luxury of having no one to care for but myself. My phone had been buzzing all night. I'd turned the volume off but could see the screen lighting up every few minutes like a desperate lighthouse beacon. 43 missed calls. 28 text messages. All from my children. all variations on the same theme: panic, guilt, and the dawning realization that their actions might have consequences they hadn't considered. I made myself coffee in the kitchen where I'd once prepared thousands of meals for ungrateful mouths, then sat down to read their messages like morning entertainment. Samuel: Mom, I drove by your house 3 times last night. Your lights were on, but you won't answer. This isn't you. Please call me. William: I can't sleep. I keep thinking about how Dad would feel about what we did. He'd be ashamed of us. I'm ashamed of us. Please give us a chance to make this right. Victoria: Mom, I told the kids that Grandma couldn't come for Thanksgiving because she was sick. I couldn't tell them the truth. I couldn't tell them that their mother is a terrible person who hurt the woman who gave her everything. Please don't let this be how our story ends. The desperation in their words was intoxicating. For the first time in 8 months, I felt powerful instead of pitiful. They needed me now, but not in the way they'd needed me before. Not for money or favors or solutions to problems they'd created for themselves. They needed my forgiveness, my mercy, my willingness to pretend their cruelty had been an accident. They weren't going to get it. I deleted the messages and got dressed in my best black wool coat, the one I'd bought for George's funeral and hadn't worn since. Today felt like another kind of funeral, the death of whatever naive hope I'd been carrying that my children might eventually remember how to love the woman who'd raised them. The Westfield Animal Shelter was a modest brick building on the edge of town, surrounded by chain-link fences and the sound of barking dogs. Rebecca Belanger, the director, met me at the entrance with a warm smile and genuine enthusiasm that I hadn't experienced in months. Mrs. Georgeson, thank you so much for coming. We're absolutely thrilled about your interest in supporting our mission. She was young, maybe 30, with the kind of earnest energy that reminded me of myself at that age, back when I believed that love and sacrifice would be rewarded with loyalty and gratitude. Please call me Scarlett, I said. I'm looking forward to seeing what you do here. Rebecca led me through the facility with obvious pride, showing me the kennels where abandoned dogs waited for new families, the medical facility where sick animals were nursed back to health, the training rooms where volunteers taught basic obedience to pets whose previous owners had given up on them. This is Max, she said, stopping in front of a kennel where a graying German Shepherd mix lay quietly on a blanket. He's been with us for 4 months. His family surrendered him when they had a baby, said they didn't have time for him anymore. I looked at Max, who gazed back at me with those knowing eyes that dogs have, the ones that seem to understand rejection better than humans ever could. He'd been loyal and loving for 8 years, and the moment his family decided he was inconvenient, they'd discarded him like trash. How old is he? I asked. 11. Senior dogs are always the hardest to place. People want puppies. Young, energetic, uncomplicated. They don't want animals that remind them of their own mortality. I knelt down and extended my hand toward the kennel. Max approached slowly, sniffed my fingers, then pressed his graying muzzle against the chain link. His tail moved in a tentative wag, as if he was afraid to hope too hard. He's beautiful, I said, and meant it. We continued the tour, but I found myself thinking about Max and all the other discarded creatures in this place. Animals who'd given their hearts completely and been abandoned when they became inconvenient. Animals who still wagged their tails when strangers approached, still hoped for kindness despite being betrayed by the humans they'd trusted most. At least animals were honest about their needs. They didn't pretend to love you while planning to exclude you from their important moments. Our biggest challenge is funding, Rebecca explained as we finished the tour in her office. We're a no-kill shelter, which means we care for animals until they find homes, regardless of how long it takes. But that gets expensive. Medical care, food, staff, facility maintenance. Every donation makes a real difference. What would it mean to your operation if you received a donation of, say, $2 million? Rebecca's coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. I'm sorry, did you say 2 million? Approximately. Possibly more, depending on how my investments perform over the next few years. She set down her cup with shaking hands. Mrs. Georgeson, Scarlett, that would change everything. We could expand our medical facilities, hire more staff, maybe even purchase the building next door and double our capacity. We could save so many more animals. Animals that other people have thrown away? Yes, exactly. Animals that deserve better than they got. I nodded. I think I understand exactly what you mean. My phone rang as I was driving home from the shelter. Victoria's name on the screen. I answered on the fourth ring. Mom, please don't hang up. I'm begging you. We need to talk. I'm listening. Can we meet somewhere? All of us? We want to apologize properly. We want to explain. There's nothing to explain, Victoria. You made your feelings perfectly clear. You wanted an intimate Thanksgiving without your mother. You got exactly what you asked for. It was a mistake. We were being selfish and stupid and you were being honest, I interrupted. For the first time in years, you were completely honest about how you see me. I should thank you for that clarity. That's not true. We love you. We've always loved you. Love is a verb, Victoria. It's something you do, not something you feel. And what you did was exclude me from the most important family gathering of the year. What you did was send me a text message like I was some casual acquaintance you were uninviting from a dinner party. Her voice broke. We were wrong. We know we were wrong. But you're our mother. You have to forgive us. That's what mothers do. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car, staring at the house where I'd wasted so many years believing that being needed was the same thing as being valued. No, Victoria. What mothers do is sacrifice everything for their children and expect nothing in return. What mothers do is give and give and give until there's nothing left of themselves but an empty bank account and a broken heart. What mothers do is make excuses for their children's cruelty and pretend it's love. I'm done being that kind of mother. What does that mean? It means you're adults now. You don't need a mother anymore. You made that very clear on Thursday. So from now on, you won't have one. Mom, you can't mean that. I mean every word. Goodbye, Victoria. I hung up and turned off the phone. Inside my house, I walked straight to the family photo wall and began taking down pictures. 27 years of birthday parties and Christmas mornings and graduation ceremonies, all of it going into a box that I would donate to charity along with George's clothes. Someone else could use these frames. Someone else could fill them with pictures of people who actually wanted to be together. By evening, the walls were bare except for the nail holes where my family used to hang. The house looked different now, cleaner somehow, less cluttered with false sentiment and manufactured memories. I ordered Chinese takeout and ate it at my kitchen table while reading the shelter's informational brochures. Tomorrow, I would call James Morrison and discuss setting up a trust fund to ensure the animals would be cared for long after I was gone. My children had taught me something valuable, though I doubt they'd meant to. Love without reciprocity is just another word for stupidity. And I was done being stupid. 6 weeks later, I was sitting in my empty living room with Max at my feet when the doorbell rang. I'd adopted him from the shelter the week after Thanksgiving, and he'd settled into my quiet house like he'd always belonged there. Unlike my children, Max seemed to appreciate consistency, loyalty, and the simple comfort of knowing someone would always be there when he needed them. Through the window, I could see all 3 of my children standing on my front porch. Victoria was holding what looked like a wrapped present. William had his hands shoved deep in his coat pockets, and Samuel kept shifting his weight from foot to foot like a guilty teenager. They'd been trying to reach me for weeks, but I'd changed my phone number and had all their letters returned to sender unopened. The doorbell rang again, followed by tentative knocking. "Mom, we know you're in there," Samuel called. "Please, it's Christmas Eve. We can't do this anymore." I stroked Max's graying head and stayed perfectly still. He looked up at me with those wise eyes, as if asking whether I wanted him to alert them to my presence. I shook my head slightly, and he settled back down, content to wait for my lead. "Mom, please." Victoria's voice was thick with tears. "The kids keep asking about Grandma. They want to give you their presents. They made you cards at school." The manipulation was clumsy, but predictable. Use the grandchildren as emotional leverage, make me the villain who was hurting innocent babies by refusing to participate in their performance of family togetherness. But I'd learned something over the past 6 weeks. Guilt only works on people who believe they've done something wrong. I hadn't. "We brought your Christmas present," William said, his voice carrying through the door. And we wanted to tell you about Dad's headstone. The engraving is finished. We thought you'd want to see it. Using George's memory as bait was a new low, even for them. But it told me everything I needed to know about how desperate they'd become. The realization that their inheritance had vanished wasn't some distant future concern anymore. It was a present reality that affected every financial decision they made. Samuel had called James Morrison's office 3 times trying to get information about my estate planning. The attorney, bound by client confidentiality, had told him nothing. But Samuel was smart enough to piece together the obvious. His mother had changed her will, and his financial future was no longer secure. William had started looking for a second job to help cover his alimony payments. Victoria had put her house on the market because she could no longer afford the mortgage without the inheritance she'd been counting on to pay off her credit card debt. All of this I'd learned from Mrs. Patterson, who remained friends with William's ex-wife and had no idea she was feeding me intelligence about my children's growing desperation. "Please, Mom," Victoria tried again. "We miss you. The house feels wrong without you. Christmas feels wrong. Everything feels wrong." What felt wrong was the 27 years I'd spent making their lives easy while they took my love for granted. What felt wrong was the birthday parties I'd planned and paid for while they complained about the decorations. What felt wrong was the college tuition I'd sacrificed my retirement to provide while they partied and failed classes. What felt wrong was the down payments I'd given them for houses they couldn't afford while I ate generic cereal to save money. The knocking stopped. I heard them talking among themselves in hushed voices, probably debating whether to try the back door or give up and leave. After 10 minutes, their footsteps retreated down the front walk, and car doors slammed. But they didn't drive away. I watched from my upstairs bedroom window as they sat in Samuel's BMW in my driveway, probably calling other relatives to intervene on their behalf. My sister Linda had already tried reaching out, warning me that I was being too harsh, and that family forgiveness was important during the holidays. I'd told Linda exactly what I'd told my children. I was done being the family doormat, and anyone who didn't like it could join them in my rearview mirror. The car finally pulled away as the winter sun was setting, leaving my driveway empty and quiet again. That evening, I sat by my Christmas tree, a modest 4-footer decorated with ornaments I'd collected during my travels with George, before children had made vacation budgets impossible. Max lay beside my chair, occasionally thumping his tail when I looked down at him. Under the tree was a single present I'd bought for myself, a first-class plane ticket to Scotland, where I'd always wanted to visit the castles George and I had dreamed of seeing together. The trip was scheduled for Valentine's Day, when my children would be spending their own money on romantic dinners they could actually afford now that Mom's bank account was no longer subsidizing their lifestyles. My new phone rang, the number I'd given only to James Morrison, the animal shelter, and my doctor. It was Rebecca from the shelter. "Scarlett, I hope I'm not disturbing your Christmas Eve, but I had to call with wonderful news. The trust fund you established has already allowed us to save 12 animals that we would have had to turn away before. There's a family of puppies that was abandoned in a parking lot yesterday, and we have space for them now because of your generosity." "That's wonderful, Rebecca. How are they doing?" "Scared but healthy. The vet thinks they're about 8 weeks old. Someone just left them in a cardboard box next to a dumpster. Can you imagine?" I could imagine it perfectly. I'd been left in my own kind of cardboard box, discarded when I became inconvenient, abandoned when I was no longer useful. "They'll find good homes," I said. "Animals always know who really loves them." After I hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and raised it in a toast to the empty room. "Merry Christmas to me," I said aloud, the same words I'd spoken on Thanksgiving. They felt truer now, more solid, like something I actually meant instead of something I was trying to convince myself to believe. Max lifted his head and looked at me with what I swear was understanding. Dogs don't judge their humans for being selective about who deserves their love. They just give it freely to those who earn it and withhold it from those who don't. It was a lesson my children had never learned, but then again, they'd never had to. They'd been handed unconditional love from birth and mistaken it for unlimited tolerance. They'd confused my maternal devotion with doormat weakness, my sacrifices with obligation, my presence with entitlement. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight, officially beginning Christmas Day. Somewhere across town, my children were probably lying awake, wondering if this was really happening, if their mother had actually chosen abandonment over reconciliation, if the inheritance they'd been counting on was really gone forever. I hoped they were. I hoped they were learning what it felt like to be discarded, to have someone you loved choose to exclude you from their life, to realize that your future security was no longer guaranteed. Most of all, I hoped they were finally understanding that love, real love, is earned through consistency, loyalty, and respect. It's not something you can bank on, spend carelessly, and expect to replenish itself. My phone would ring again tomorrow. They would make more desperate attempts to restore their access to my heart and my bank account. They would promise to change, to do better, to include me in their lives if only I would forgive them and restore their inheritance. But I was done with their promises. I was done with their apologies. I was done with their version of love that only appeared when they needed something. From now on, my love and my money would go to creatures who understood the value of both. Creatures who wouldn't throw me away the moment I became inconvenient. Max stretched and settled more comfortably against my feet, trusting and content in the knowledge that I would be there tomorrow, and the day after that, and every day until one of us was gone. Unlike my children, he knew that loyalty was a two-way street, and unlike my former self, I finally understood that some relationships are worth preserving, and others are worth walking away from. The difference I'd learned was in knowing which was which. Now tell me, what would you do if you were in my place? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from.